Namaskar. WhatsApp post Mid-Air Mission Impossible The Legend of Gutsy Gaur. Written by Group Captain Ashok K. Chordia. Mid-Air Mission Impossible The Legend of Gutsy Gaur. Late that November evening in 1982, the Air Officer Commanding AOC Air Force Station Kheria in Agra was the most concerned commander of the Indian Air Force. A Mayday call from a C-119 Fairchild packet aircraft of No. 12 Squadron Air Force on a routine training flight had sent Air Commodore K.K. Badwar rushing to the air traffic control tower. There's an emergency. Packet aircraft. Problem with the nose landing gear. Orbiting overhead. Will approach for landing in about an hour. He had been informed briefly by the air traffic controller on duty, who was in a great hurry to drop the line. His attention and all his energies were focused. The ATC tower was abuzz, preparing to deal with the worst. The crash crew had been alerted. The crash tenders and the ambulances were ready, awaiting further orders. The routine takeoff and landing of aircraft had been stopped altogether. All other aircraft had been advised to clear the airspace and the runway. Everyone concerned had been notified. Once in the control tower, the AOC conversed with squadron leader C.K. Jolly, the captain of the aircraft, and gauged the gravity of the situation. Minutes ago, when the packet aircraft, call sign IK-461, was approaching Agra airfield for its sixth landing, the captain had observed that on lowering the landing gear, the nose landing gear warning light had remained red. Steps to lower the nose wheel as per the standard operating procedure had been in vain. Either the warning light indication in the cockpit was faulty or the landing gear was actually malfunctioning. In the latter case, it was a serious emergency. The nosewheel landing gear could collapse on touchdown, leading to a difficult to manage crisis situation. A few more checks confirmed the worst fears. It was a positive warning. The nose landing gear was actually dysfunctional. C-119 Fairchild packet was one of its kind flying machine, if it could be called one. In appearance, it was quite an unaircraft-like. People marveled at its ability to mock the laws of gravity and the principles of flight. Its designers called it a flying boxcars. Others, less kind in their treatment of the aircraft, awarded it the epithet flying coffin. It wouldn't be much of an exaggeration if one were to declare that this aircraft of the Korean War vintage of the early 1950s used to get airborne and stay afloat more because of the willpower of the magnificent men who flew it, and those who enabled its flight, the technicians, than because of its powerful engines and large wingspan. Having served the USAF and then the IAF so very well for long years, the aging machine demanded superior care and maintenance to remain airworthy. The memory of a crash on the takeoff run, although not due to a technical snag, wherein a contingent of 42 paratroopers, 5 parachute jump instructors, and the aircrew had perished in a fireball in the not too distant past, must have weighed heavily on the mind of the AOC as he listened to the conversation between the controller and the captain. Yet, in that extremely charged atmosphere, he was quiet, composed, and uninterfering. Air Commodore Badwar, a decorated Canberra bomber pilot and a hero of the 1971 Indo-Pak War, a Veer Chakra awardee, knew the air warriors under his command well. They were dutiful, conscious men who didn't need hand holding or nudging. Leadership, flying boxcar. Up there in the aircraft, there was practically no choice. The captain had consulted the other crew members and the professionals who had gathered in the ATC tower and had taken an informed decision to land. That decision would mean a very high probability of the nose landing gear piercing through the aircraft structure on making contact with the runway surface, its propellers hitting the concrete, the engines and the airframe suffering damage and causing a major fire. The possibility of the aircraft cartwheeling due to one of the wings hitting the ground and ending up in a mangled mass of metal couldn't be ruled out either. Threat to the lives of the 7 air warriors on board was a given. The only thing they would do was to land with nearly empty fuel tanks to minimize the ferocity of the blaze. Decision to land anyway had been taken, and it was a unanimous decision. Almost, mind it, almost. Among the crew was a young flight engineer whose mind was flying out of the boxcar. Flight Lieutenant Sumer Chand Gaur, SC for short, for his friends, was an engineer instructor on type, knew the aircraft systems like the backside of his hand. He thought differently and was somehow unconvinced about the decision to land the aircraft in that condition. He didn't accept what others saw as a fait accompli. Flight Lieutenant Gaur reasoned with the captain that the nose undercarriage was not lowering and locking due to an internal obstruction. He opined that it was possible in flight to remove the jack from its attachments in the nose undercarriage bay and let the landing gear free to come down fully. A qualified flying instructor himself, Squadron Leader Jolly, understood the technicality very well, but wavered on the decision to attempt rectification. The solution was fraught with great risk, and as a captain, he was just not ready to expose his flight engineer to that danger. A healthy debate ensued, even as time and fuel, the most precious commodities in that crisis, kept running out. Anyone attempting to rectify the snag could accidentally fall off the aircraft to instant death. The captain's dilemma was whether he should put Gaur's life to risk in the hope that all 7 lives might be saved, or not allow Gaur to attempt rectification and endanger all 7 lives on touchdown. The captain remained caught up between the devil and the deep sea for a short while, but then gave in to the enthusiasm of his flight engineer. He allowed him to discuss the plan with the experts sitting in the ATC tower and to get another opinion. The AOC on the others listened attentively to Gaur on the radio set and grasped the technical viability of the solution suggested by him. But most of them thought he was volunteering for an extremely audacious action, almost impossible to execute to solve the problem. It entailing hanging outside below the aircraft and working on the landing gear. A mistake while attempting it could send him hurtling 5,000 feet down to Mother Earth. All eyes were on the AOC. Air Commodore Badwar knew Flight Lieutenant Gaur as an energetic and enthusiastic young officer, a thoroughbred professional and a go-getter in that. He took little time to decide and was unflinching when he gave a nod to his gutsy plan of action. That indeed marked the beginning of a 47-minute ordeal which, to those involved in it, would appear to be an eternity. Moments into the exercise, the protagonist realized that the problem was far more complex and they had not visualized. To begin with, the gap created by removing the panels from the floor of the aircraft was too small for a well built Gaur to pass through. Also, the poorly lit space in the wheel bay was very cramped. There was hardly any elbow room. It was a struggle for him to squeeze into the rat hole. Non availability of proper tools on board made things more difficult. Jugaad turned out to be the watchword. Without wasting any time, Gore got down to execute the mission impossible. One of his trainee flight engineers held his feet as he got himself lowered head first into the nose wheel bay. November in Agra is rather cold. Incidentally, it was November the 25th, a day after SC's 36th birthday. A ruthless December was less than a week away. At 7:45 p.m., outside the aircraft, it was dark and freezing. In the wheel bay, cold air at 100 miles per hour pierced Gaure's face and numbed his nose and cheeks. Within seconds, his eyes and nose started watering. 6 to 8 minutes was a very long time to work in that air blast. So, Gaur surveyed the landing gear and quickly withdrew into the cargo compartment for a breather. He had to thaw his frozen nose and clean his face, which was, thanks to the wind chill, smeared with fresh saliva and mucus. The very best in people comes to the fore when they are in life and death situations. It is as true about the grit and resilience of men in distress as about their sense of humor. At a time when they were unsure of seeing another sunrise, Squadron Leader Narwal, the navigator, did not miss any opportunity to crack jokes to lighten the mood, even as Flight Lieutenant Gaur prepared to enter the nose wheel bay a second time. He stood precariously in the bay, clinging on to a strong point with one hand and working on the landing gear with the other. The blast of cold air was relentless in its effort to dislodge the young engineer. His fingers frozen again, Gaur resurfaced into the cargo compartment, only to regain his breath, warm and revive his fingers and wipe his face. The process repeated. In about 40 minutes, Gaur had been into the nose wheel bay 5 times. All this while, the cockpit crew and the AOC in the ATC tower listened with bated breath to the running commentary that was being broadcast by the flight signaller, Junior Warrant Officer Subbu, who was keenly observing and relaying every piece of action. With great effort, Gaur was able to unlock the nut holding the landing gear actuator. The bolt, however, remained stuck. It was imperative to dislodge it to set the landing gear free. His attempts to remove it were fruitless. He needed a hammer to complete the task. Meanwhile, breathing was becoming a strain. He felt exhausted. One of the crew brought a cylinder of breathing oxygen with a mask to comfort him. Rejuvenated by a tonic of jokes and several lungfuls of oxygen, he got down to pushing the bolt out of its casing. For want of a hammer, he struggled with a large spanner. At last, the adamant bolt slipped out. Then, without wasting another second, Gaur removed the actuator, freeing the landing gear to move into fully down position. There was instant jubilation in the cockpit. The nose wheel undercarriage warning light had turned green. In the last action, Gaur inserted the ground lock pin into the undercarriage to prevent its accidental retraction. He tied it with a lashing chain and a jack to make it absolutely safe. Although smiling, Katsy Gaur was numb and utterly sapped when he emerged from the nose wheel bay for the sixth and the last time. Down below in the control tower, there was a feeble sense of celebration. Eeriness had pervaded the air. People had their fingers crossed as they waited for the aircraft to land. Cautiously, squadron leader Jolly made a perfect landing and switched off the engine power instantly. With minimum use of brakes, he carefully brought the aircraft to a halt at the end of the long runway. The AOC arrived instantly at the head of a convoy of vehicles, crash tenders, fire tenders, ambulances, and cranes. With arms wide open and a smile that conveyed everything, he welcomed the crew. After a warm hug, he offered his overcoat to Gaur, who was still shivering. He learnt about the incident from Gaur and Jolly as he drove them to the flight commander's office where cups of much sought hot coffee awaited them. After completing the documentation, the crew of IK 461 headed to the squadron commander's residence to celebrate a happy end to their ordeal. The celebration continued into the wee hours of the morning. For a display of professionalism of the highest order and the selfless devotion to duty under extremely perilous circumstances, Flight Lieutenant Sumay Chand Gaur was awarded the coveted Shaurya Chakra, Exceptional Peacetime Gallantry, by Gyani Jail Singh, the then President of India. Still later, in recognition of his distinguished services, he was awarded the Vishishta Seva Medal, a well-earned Shaurya Chakra. Now, a veteran, Group Captain S.C. Gaur, SC VSM, resides in Ghaziabad. When the ever so youthful and daring officer is not playing golf, he spends time motivating youth. The legacy must live. The baton must be passed on. Thank you. Read by Sanjay Inamdar.